Welcome to Product Unfiltered, a podcast brought to you by two aspiring product managers in Silicon Valley navigating the exciting world of product management. Join us as we invite amazing product leaders to discuss the latest trend in the industry, share their experience in the product management, and provide insights and advice for those interested in a career in product management. From ideation to launch, we'll cover it all here. So tune in for interviews with industry experts and product managers. I, Rahul Goel, along with Utkarsh Khandelwal, will be your host for Product Unfiltered.
Today we have a very special guest joining in, Devang Gaur. He's a product manager working at PayPal. Devang will be sharing key insights into what it is like to work in the fintech sector. Devang, could you please introduce yourself and share about your background and experiences with the audience?
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for having me here. Hi everyone. My name is Devang Gaur, and I am currently a product manager at PayPal, particularly in the Braintree product at PayPal. Before PayPal, I had around 5 years of experience, mostly on the engineering side. I started as a software engineer, went on to become a technical lead, and then I kind of decided to pivot to product as I figured I had acquired the skill of understanding how to build a product from the technical standpoint, but I needed to acquire that skill of what to build, and I thought that is something that was missing in my toolkit. And with that aim in mind, I came for my master's to the US. I studied software management at Carnegie Mellon University. I recently graduated in December of 2022, and after that, I started working at PayPal as a product manager. I'm really glad to be here.
Perfect. And Devang, with such curiosity in the fintech domain right now, we are really curious to know a typical day of a fintech product manager at a company like PayPal. So we would love to understand what are your roles and responsibilities and what are the products and projects you're working at PayPal.
Sure. So I would say, even like for me, even before joining PayPal, I had the opportunity to intern also at PayPal during my summer internship, right? So I had that 3 to 4 months of time where I got to understand much more about PayPal. The team that I work in is kind of the back-end payment processing team. So think of it like this. Whenever you go out or whenever you try to book a ride on Uber or maybe order food from DoorDash, uh, and you press on that buy button, from that event all the way till the money deducting from your account and getting credited to the merchants, basically DoorDash or Uber's account, that flow is kind of something that I closely work on. Now, when you think of that, there are just so many stakeholders in that entire transaction flow, right? You have, the merchant who has built that entire experience. Obviously, you have the customer who is, who has that trust on the merchant coming in and trying to select a different payment method and then executing a transaction. But within the transaction flow, you have banks, you have network providers like Visa, Mastercard, all of these guys.
Yeah.
You have various payment processors as well. You have acquiring banks, you have merchant banks, all of these different stakeholders. So for me, I would say a typical day in a product manager's life, especially I would say at PayPal, in my team, revolves around managing communication and work within and across these different stakeholders, because there are different challenges with working with all of these different stakeholders, right? And we have close integrations with all our partners. So managing all that communication and work is something that forms the typical day of a PM's life.
That's nice to know, yeah. But Devang, so my question is, generally we see fintech space as something which is very complex and in itself is a niche. So what is your take on this, and what was your background before you entered the fintech space?
I would say that's actually true in my brief experience about exploring fintech and then finally getting a job as a PM at PayPal. I would say before PayPal, I had a little bit of a payments background as well, where I got to understand a little bit about how cards work, from issuing cards to certain users, then understanding how the transaction flow looks like. As I said, right, when you click on buy button on any merchant app, how does the money gets pulled out from your account and then gets credited to the merchant's account. So understanding that uh, transaction flow was something that I had some experience on. But the core difference was for me that earlier I was on the consumer side. So earlier I was building those apps which were, using these APIs, using these solutions, the ones that Braintree or PayPal provides. But now working within Braintree gives me a different side of the equation, where now I am working on that infrastructure itself, right? So the challenges are quite different, because now I'm not a consumer of those APIs. I'm not a customer of Braintree. I am working on the platform which is, getting scaled up to provide services, payment services to so many big merchants, Uber, DoorDash, Spotify, and so many others, right? So that was something that was, I would say I did not understand very well, but during my internship and as the time went by, I kind of started understanding more and more. And also a key differentiator also is that although the products are a bit technical, but since it's part of, like, transactions are part of our daily life, right? Like in any given day, you spend money, you do so many transactions, whether using a credit card, debit card, or Apple Pay, or whatever, right? So after a certain point, it kind of becomes intuitive that, because you do that, but you understand things without knowing them properly. So the same thing, when I work at Braintree, I understand, okay, this is something that I do daily, but I do not know the specifics, how it's happening in the back end. So that is something that's quite interesting to understand. But still, I would say, it's, first of all, if you want to explore fintech, one of the most important things is to try and understand, because fintech is so huge, right? You can't just say that what I am doing is, fintech. Like, there are so many other things that are under the ambit of that fintech umbrella, right? So you have, a lot of these insurtech companies. Payments is just one part of fintech, right? You have embedded finance that's coming up. So try to explore the domain, try to understand, because understanding how money flows is something that's very fascinating. Understanding right from how it started during the barter exchange to up until now, where we have, tap and pay. Understanding how they're transformed over the years is something very important. And once you start understanding that, I think it becomes a lot more easier to connect with people, to network with people, and understand their terminology as well, and then pitch yourself to say that, this is something that I'm quite interested in, and then make your way through those roles, maybe it is a PM role or a strategy role or any other role in the fintech domain.
So Devang, if you have to define fintech space to a 5-year or 6-year-old kid, then how would you define fintech?
This is interesting. I mean, I don't know. I should ask ChatGPT probably, but but I would say, for me, it's very, like, it has always been about understanding the flow of money, because if you understand that one thing, how people spend, there are just so many challenges around that entire flow itself, right? Because money is something that, in a way, kind of rules the world, right? Economies, countries, everyone is kind of run on that that one commodity, basically, right? So it's important for everyone. It's important for you and me as individuals. It's important for companies. It's also important for economies, countries, right? So that flow itself is, like, remarkably complex, but it's very, very important, right? So
And actually, building on to that, something really interesting which you mentioned, Devang, was how the fintech sector has evolved over the time from the barter system to what it is now. So I'm really curious to know, with the kind of innovations happening in the AI space, blockchain thing, what do you think is the future of fintech from now?
It's so, especially during the pandemic, right? A lot was written about how things will get transformed because of, Web3 and all of these, newer technologies. I think disruption is always bound to happen, but it's very hard to kind of replace the existing systems, because they have their own intrinsic value that they have built over the course of so many years. So there was a lot of there was a lot written about how, blockchain and those kind of solutions will replace the networks, these network providers. But I think that's not entirely true, in my opinion. All of those solutions will complement the existing ecosystem. They will try to make things better. For example, a lot of smart fraud detection systems and products are coming up. A lot of good startups actually working on helping merchants identify frauds at very early stages, so that they can avoid paying out those unnecessary fees that they have to pay for frauds. So those kind of solutions are needed, and those solutions are appreciated by everyone in this entire ecosystem, right? Whether they are banks, whether they are customers, merchants, or anyone. So I think those things will keep on coming. The innovations will keep on happening, whether it is Web3 or blockchain. The tech won't matter as much, I would say, but its applicability to the use cases will determine whether it will disrupt, how big the disruption will look like.
Devang, so when I look at particular industry, I always think of it from two perspectives. One is obviously the consumer, and the other one is the producer. In fintech domain, all of us are consumers from day one of our birth, like we are consumer in some or the other way.
Yeah.
But you are now seeing it from a product side or a producer side, where you produce something and then the consumers consume it. So one thing, how different the view is for you, and secondly, if you have developed something, then education plays a crucial role now, because you need to educate people how to use the technology, because the evolution is huge. Like again, coming to the barter system, then coming to the cash system, now going completely digital. So how do you define a product while building, then how are you going to educate people for that?
I think it's a two-way process. I would say, because at times what happens is, so I'll give you an example, right? Venmo is a product. Venmo is a PayPal product, right? And it's a peer-to-peer payment app basically. It started as a peer-to-peer payment app basically, but it kind of now has evolved to you can pay businesses as well. And I think with the recent launch of Venmo on Amazon, that kind of made the entire payment process for all of Amazon and Venmo users really seamless. So if we take the example of Venmo, right? So it's very fascinating to understand who are these Venmo users. Venmo started way back, right? It's not a new product. It's always fascinating to understand who are these users who use Venmo. Every day I find a lot of people who love Venmo, but I find a lot of people who do not appreciate the product as much, because you have examples of recent products as well. You have so many products which are built and they have like grown significantly in maybe like 2 to 3 years of time, right? So as a product manager, it's quite important to understand what that competition has done, so that the scale is unlocked within like 2 years. Like some product getting to 25 million users, active users, so much transaction processing volume. All of those numbers are really fascinating for us to understand how that is happening. And when you look at the data, when you look at who is actually using the user, I think the answer starts, you start figuring out the answer, because probably when Venmo started, the consumer behavior itself around spending was a little bit different, right? And insofar like the cohort of users which were using Venmo itself was different. Now with Gen Z coming to this entire arena of consumer spending, their behavior towards consumer spending can be different. They probably would expect different things from a product, which maybe competition would have figured out in a much better way, let's say. And because of those things, they check those check boxes, and because of that, they unlock tremendous growth in such a small amount of time. So I think that's something that I see like it. First of all, before educating users, I think it's also important as PMs in this domain to keep educating yourself, because all of these things are you can't you have to read about all of these things, right? Who are your users? You have to go deeper into understanding their consumer behavior as well. So that is one thing. Apart from that, I think once you understand the user better, then you keep on refining your product itself, right? Maybe just to give you a small example, right? I think, if I'm not wrong, Venmo as a product did not start offering crypto initially on the product, right? There are many reasons for it, but there are a lot of products which started offering crypto, at a very very early stage. Now they unlocked growth because of those kind of offerings in a very quick span of time. They unlocked growth because of those kind of features, maybe like within a year or two. They rode that wave of crypto during the last few years, and they did that. When more because of that extreme trust factor that we had with our users, I think potentially that was one of the reasons we did not do much about it, because the market was still kind of figuring out around crypto and a lot of these coins, right? So, but once we started realizing that there is an opportunity, but we still wanted to do things in a much better way, not like going ahead with offering a lot of crypto, right? So we started analyzing which are the value coins and those kind of things, and then we started offering in a slower fashion. So when that happens, you'll see growth in a what do you call, lesser pace basically. But it's fun to kind of understand your users first and then go back to innovating and providing them more and more value.
Absolutely, and that is what the job of product manager is: being customer centric, understanding the users.
Right, it always starts with customers.
Exactly. And while you were talking about users, understanding them in detail, I was really intrigued about the fact that you have seen the fintech industry in depth, sitting in both in India as well as in US. So I was really curious to understand what were the key differences which you saw in the fintech industry while working in India and US, and if you could also help us identify some gaps which are currently present in the both these rising economies.
I think, so first of all, I have not like explored the entire fintech world, because I do not have that big of an experience to kind of explore the entire fintech world. But within my limited experience and from what I have understood about the Indian fintech ecosystem versus what's happening in the US, there are quite a few remarkable differences, and I would like to point out a couple of them. So coming from India, I think all of us who have come from India any time after 2016-17, we all know what UPI has done in India, right? Just one phone number or just one small UPI ID. So for those of us who are not aware of what UPI is, so you can think of it as an email ID, right? So devang.gaur@UPI. So it's as simple as that. You can just use this ID to send me money. And when that offering started in, I think 2016-17, around that time, within a few years that kind of created ripples in the P2P payment industry itself. And there were so many products, so many unicorn and startups, and all of these guys started coming up, and they built really good products and experiences around that entire tech. Now, so what has happened is the instant peer-to-peer payment has become so much easier in India, right? It was still okay before that. You had different services, but with the onset of UPI, things became much more easier and more streamlined, right? And it kind of became ubiquitous as well. It was everywhere, right? You would see that QR code
scanner across all the windows.
Exactly.
And also after, I think, demonetization which happened in India,
that kind of accelerated, I think.
Exactly.
So peer-to-peer payment became instant. I think in the US, that's not the case. There are a lot of reasons around it, because I feel that the need to receive money or send money right away was itself kind of not appreciated within the consumer mindset in the US, I believe. Therefore, for a lot of reasons, I think US has always been this credit-driven economy. Unlike India, where merchants, small businesses, everyone needs reconciliation of their money as soon as possible, because they are working on wafer thin margins, and there is only so much credit available to them that they can deploy. So because of those reasons, I think instant payment settlements were crucial for a country like India, a growing economy. Not so much probably for for a country like US. And this is something that's, I think, my hypothesis. I don't think that I don't know if something is written about it, but this is what I have seen, that maybe this is one of those reasons because of which. But now the need has kind of started cropping up, because now the consumer behavior itself has changed, right? As I said, like with new generation coming in and earning money, their consumer pattern would be different from the generation before that, right? So now the need is getting felt, and you would notice because of that all of these peer-to-peer instant payment products coming up. And I think somewhere this year, the federal bank is also coming up with a new product called Fed Now, I guess. So
Yeah.
when that launches, we'll see all of this transformation will get more accelerated, I believe. That is one difference. Instant P2P payments has become much easier in India as compared to here. And I think the other part where UPI has kind of changed things or transformed that extensively is remittance market as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that is going to get disrupted. That market is going to get disrupted because of UPI transfers, because India has already started exporting UPI to different countries. I think
Exactly.
more than, I think last I read more than 20 countries. If I'm not
Absolutely,
wrong, don't quote me on
yeah,
numbers,
absolutely.
but there are a lot of countries which are actually using, and I think even France and a lot of European countries are already onboarding on UPI. And the last I read was, I think RBI has also, Reserve Bank of India has allowed NRIs, primarily in countries like US,
yeah.
which are the biggest source of remittance to India, to remit money back to India with just the use of UPI.
Exactly.
So that is something that is remarkable, because earlier you needed the account number, SWIFT code, and all of those details of the user. Now you only need the UPI ID, and that's also easy to get.
Exactly.
So you're just using that, you can just make instant transfers. So that is something that is, I feel, is going to get disrupted, remittances market. What else? I think some places where innovation is still happening in India, I feel, and those kind of things have started happening in the US some time back, is something in the embedded finance market, I would say.
Okay.
So embedded finance is something where these payment, you would have noticed a lot of these insurance companies have come up with products where, based on how good or bad you are as a driver, they will give you your insurance, right? So how that's happening, it's basically around, that's one example of where embedded finance would work. Based on continuous data from your driving behavior, they will provide you EMIs, and if you drive well, your EMI score will go up, and you'll be given a lower EMI probably. Not EMIs, insurance charges basically, right? So that is one thing that has started happening, and there are so many other domains. I think a lot of EV manufacturers are already exploring subscription-based features, right?
Yeah.
BMW, Audi, and Fox. All of these guys are coming up with subscription-based model. So like, if you need ventilated seats, if you need heated seats, you just pay for that. And so all of these things will happen through embedded finance as a function of fintech.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so, and I think all of that started to coming up in India as well. Maybe it will take a little bit time, but then again, as I said, all of this happens when you realize what's the applicability of these use cases, right? So in India, the applicability of instant payment was a dire need. Because of that, it kind of accelerated so well. In the US, the need is getting felt right now, and it will take time, but it will get there. But there's remarkable innovation happening in both the geographies.
That is so insightful. And in fact, the type of improvements which you just mentioned about embedded finance, we have been seeing these kind of developments in almost every industry. Tesla has come up with such an innovative model of getting subscriptions and focusing on getting recurring payments rather than a one-time thing, to ensure that better revenue model could be generated. So I think embedded finance is the future, and definitely such kind of improvements we'll be seeing in all these rising economies.
So Devang, you mentioned about UPI going global. It's just a yes and no question. So do you think it will make Indian rupees as a global currency soon?
I would answer no to that, and I will give a reason. So I think the idea of globalizing UPI is not to make is not to make INR or Indian rupee. The idea is not to replace any currency with INR. I think the idea is more to kind of integrate a lot of these disassembled unit in the fintech infrastructure. So I mean, think of it like that. There has been so much innovation happening in the fintech area, but still transferring money, cross-border payments have always been something that everyone did not like. Like, there is so much happened, so many good products have come, but a lot of those products may be served like 3 to 5 countries, or maybe certain geographies where the volume of transactions was huge, but there was no global product in a sense which could actually solve that problem. So I think UPI has a lot of scope in doing that, because if it gets exposed as a protocol, then it can be an open protocol where where countries can actually get onboarded very easily. And once they become part of that ecosystem, I think the disruption will happen in terms of how easy it will become to make the cross-border payments, really superb. So what started as an instant P2P payment service, I would say, has a lot of potential in making cross-border payments or revolutionizing cross-border payments. And remind you, that's not only for individual remittances as well.
Yeah.
Imagine governments doing
Institution,
transactions,
Exactly.
institutions, businesses doing so that volume itself will be huge. So I think that is where the real value of UPI lies, in my opinion. But we'll see.
What do you think is the future of these credit card companies like MasterCard and Visa? We have seen a drastic decline in the usage of these credit card providers because merchants are looking forward to use UPIs in which there is no certain charge. It's being a very organized thing. So, what do you think is the future with respect to these
I
companies?
think so. It's actually there's a lot of debate going around that.
Yeah.
Right? So I would say there is a push of it. So UPI is like a government run infrastructure. Right?
Yeah.
So right now, I think in my understanding, the government is incentivizing merchants basically to use UPI, and they don't have to provide any extra fees, right? As they have to provide to card networks like Visa, Mastercard, and all of these folks. But I think it will be interesting to see how that pans out in the next couple of years, because in my opinion, there is only so much support you can provide forever, right?
Yeah.
There has to be some way to monetize. I'm not saying it can't be monetized in some other way. There can be a really perfect business model by not charging the merchant per se. Maybe UPI making money, as I said, right? Globalizing, maybe getting money from there and not monetizing via the merchant. So that's a potential as well. But I think until that happens, I would say the risk is always there that what happens if UPI transactions itself are charged for merchants.
That is very valid.
Yeah, and I'm really enjoying the conversation, Devang, because you're giving so many thought-provoking ideas to us to
Exactly.
come up with things in the fintech space. But as you mentioned that before educating the users, you need to educate yourself to be in this domain. So what all are the key resources which you regularly follow to keep yourself updated in the fintech space and also in the product space in general?
So I think in terms of what are the resources that can be helpful for folks trying to get into product management, or even who have recently started their career as a PM, right? So the first thing that I would like to recommend is for folks who are coming from a technical background. Folks with a non-technical background can also try to do this. I think it will be really a real rewarding experience. The reason I say that is because a lot of times, a lot of these infrastructure level products like Braintree, PayPal, Stripe, all of these are technical products essentially, right? They provide SDKs, they provide APIs. So as a PM, you need to have that fundamental understanding of what the SDK is, what the API is. If someone has been a software engineer, I'm guessing they will already know that. For those folks, you can just go and look at least the high level view of what APIs are provided as part of the product, right? It will make your life very easy to understand a lot about the product. And a lot of these companies have very good developer documentation. PayPal has one of the best developer documentation in the entire industry, I would say. Try to see what you can get from that. Also, a lot of other companies also, right? Stripe also has very good documentation as well. Go through that. Apart from developer docs, all of these companies have very good blogs as well, where they talk about they talk in detail about one particular product feature itself. So that itself is a very good knowledge resource itself. Apart from that, a lot of industry reports. Business Insider is something that I follow a lot. I think back in India we had something called Zerodha Varsity that I followed a lot. I think Zerodha Varsity kind of was a 101 on money flow itself. So to understand the entire, the history and the how the money moves actually within the economy. So that was good to understand. Apart from that, if I talk about any blogs or any content that's getting generated by, I think, independent content creators, I would say I think I benefited a lot from I think at the top of my mind I can remember two. One is Akash. He worked as a group product manager, I believe, at a firm, and before that I think he was at Google and a lot of other companies. So I follow his newsletter quite regularly, and that has been like a very valuable knowledge resource for me to understand things. Apart from that, I also follow Shreyash Doshi quite extensively. That's very nice. Apart from that, I think in terms of if I have to like recall any books that I can recommend, I would say one of the books that I recommend everyone, whether they want to become a PM or not, is a book from Nee Real called Hooked. That is a must read, I believe, for everyone to understand how products in the modern world are getting built. And the other one is a book by I think a very renowned professor from Wharton. His name is Jonah Berger. So he has a book called Contagious. So that is a very, very good read. It gives you a very concise framework of understanding how can you build products for word of mouth marketing from day one. So that's something that's really good to understand in terms of building your product muscle itself. I think if you start doing that, I mean, I'm not asking you to do like all of them, like pick one, and as your interest peaks, you can diversify a lot of these resources.
So I guess we have got a lot of great insights from the whole podcast. But any last minute advice to our listeners who might be aspiring product managers, thinking of entering not just fintech space but in general the product space, or people who have just entered the product space? Any last minute advice for them?
Yeah, I think maybe a lot of you would have already heard this, but I think so this advice is valid for both the kind of folks who want to become a product manager and who have recently started their career as a product manager. I would say two things are really important, and those are kind of linked. One is being as curious as possible, and the other one is, if you are curious enough, after a certain point, that habit of taking ownership comes along, right? So the reason I say that is because I think there's this popular saying that if there's an opportunity and you don't know about it, then just say yes and figure out how will you execute it later. That's actually very nice, but to make it work perfectly, or if not perfectly, at least in a much better fashion, I think it's good that you try to understand as early as possible, right? Try to find answers. So being curious helps you do that. So if you want to be a product manager, try to understand, try to ask questions. Like if you're just pick any daily product and try to see why is this done the way it is done, right? Or why is the color of this app like this, right? So all of these successful products have figured out something, right? Something really crucial, and there's always a reason for all of these things, right? That app that we see is a real estate. So all of those decisions are where to put this button, what color, what is the content, all of those things, what's the illustrate, all of those things are like very key decisions. So try to understand, figure out if you can get the answers. So that's where being curious helps. And once you become a product manager, then you have to consistently do that. Don't stop, like consistently do that, so that you understand about the domain, you understand about a problem, you understand about the customers much better. And then obviously, like being a PM, I think is a lot about ownership, proactive ownership, instead of someone else coming and saying that this is the thing that you have to work on. I think your growth and your learning will become much easier if you figure out on your own what you are interested in, and then pitch to your leaders that this is something that I want to do. And I think that is it. Like, and once you start doing that, there are a lot of things that that
All
come
the
along,
companies,
and then it will. Everyone kind of needs that starting point, and after that, things become easy for people.
I totally agree with you. Being curious and being hungry, that's the two things which I think all product managers always aspire for. So thank you so much, Devang, for taking our time to help us record this episode. So this officially brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you everyone for tuning into Product Unfiltered. I hope all of you have got some great insights about fintech industry and product area in general. So stay tuned for more such amazing episodes, and thank you for tuning into Product Unfiltered.